Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Binkhorsts and Blockbusters. I'm Garrett,
And I'm Kate.
and today we are nearing the end of Dunuary and are going to talk about Star Wars.
Dunuary.
So Dunuary has been our 2 month long project to go over all things Dune, mostly movies, sometimes action figures, um, and now introducing crypto scams.
Yeah, we've discussed a lot of different sandworm archetypes, a lot of different deserts, a lot of different ugly clothes. So here we are with our final um January episode before Dune Part 2.
I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, me too. I am very excited. I haven't seen too many like reviewy type things or anything. I don't want anything to be really spoiled. But I have only heard positive things,
Yes.
so that's good. So it's not like Napoleon where it was immediately do not see this movie. So we're starting off good there. And yeah, I'm excited. I got my ticket to see it on Thursday. Um, really excited for that. You're gonna see it Thursday, right? What time's
Yes.
your showing?
3 p.m. It's the earliest one I could find.
Ooh, so we're gonna be seeing it at the same time. So this is gonna be some great texting afterward. That is exciting.
Great. The time zones work out.
Yay! That's the problem with East West Coast time zones. So
Yeah, but
cool.
no texting or talking during the movie.
Well, duh. I'm
I'm
not a heathen.
I if anybody's talking during my showing of Dune, I'm going to be very agitated. Which
You could threaten them with the popcorn bucket.
I'm not going to buy the popcorn bucket. Okay.
See, I would buy the popcorn bucket, except I don't have a place to put the popcorn bucket, and I don't need that like permanently in my life, but I would like it in my life temporarily. So if anyone would like to send me their popcorn bucket so I can have it temporarily, and then I'll give it back. Okay?
The communal Dune popcorn bucket, please.
Yeah, that's not disgusting or anything, but
No.
yeah.
I've heard testimonies of people who have used it that say when you put your hand in the teeth of the worm force popcorn out of your hand when you grab a big bunch. So that kind of sucks.
I mean, it could be good though, because, sometimes when you're pulling the popcorn out of the bucket, you drop some on the floor. So
So,
maybe this would stop that?
so it'll just land on top of the teeth, and then you can like grab some off the top.
Yeah.
Well, you know what cinematic experience doesn't have a dedicated worm-themed popcorn bucket?
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
I would bet money that there are weirder Star Wars themed popcorn buckets out there.
Oh, that's definitely true. I know when the Phantom Menace came out, there were a bunch of like statuettes that you could put on top of like Coke cans, like on
Oh
pop
yeah.
cans.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars has a ton of collectibles like that. Of just like goofy stuff and stuff that like is it's honestly just trash. Um, but that's okay. We like trash.
Yeah. I mean, we don't like to collect trash, but we like it. Not, I mean, actually, Garrett, we don't like trash. Trash is bad.
I'm at nerd collectors mostly, and I know I'm gonna get hate on for that, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in 2024, we need to just recognize that, no one wanted the 1984 Dune action figures, and thus, we maybe should just tone it back on our junk that comes out with movies.
That's true. For Dune now, there's a Dune themed Xbox controller, I think. Microsoft added Arrakis to their flight simulator. There's a Lego. Um, there are some action figures, but it's not as big as Star Wars.
No.
And I really don't think anything will get as big as Star Wars again. Star Wars is massive. When it
Mm-hmm.
premiered in 1977, it was like overnight success. It was made on a budget of $11 million and became the fourth highest grossing film of all time. Just insane. Uh,
So
claim.
that's after Titanic and Avatar and I don't know what other
I think Marvel's Infinity War Endgame
something.
superhero
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
I think those are the top four.
Well, Titanic I believe in. The rest, it's all shit. Okay.
This is true. Uh, so Star Wars created this multimedia empire as early as the 1970s, like shortly after it came out, so the late 70s. There were comics, novels, action figures, so much merch, toy lightsabers, blasters, Halloween costumes, you name it, they had it. Um, it wears a lot of its inspiration on its sleeve. From
Mm-hmm.
a media perspective, there's a ton of inspiration from like Japanese samurai films with swords fights and things, westerns, Flash Gordon, Lawrence of Arabia, and 2001 for like the opening shots of the ships above Tatooine.
Yeah, I can see all of that.
Star Wars, alongside Jaws, is often credited for creating the summer blockbuster that we talked quite a lot about in the Jaws episode. Um, it's also believed that it was the film that marketed the shift from like smaller, personal, like artistic films in Hollywood to making these big mass market spectacles. Uh,
Hmm.
Good or bad? Don't know. That's a hard one to say. It's a
Well,
bit of both.
yeah, and I mean and that's the thing, like if we're, trading Star Wars for Jodorowsky's Dune, then yeah, that's really really disappointing. But if we're trading, you know, I don't
So
know because the new Dune's very artistic also.
right, but also a big budget spectacle blockbuster thing. And I
Yeah.
think Jodorowsky's Dune would have been Star Wars, like Star Wars as it is now, not Star Wars back then. Back then, Star Wars was a low budget. Nobody believed in it. Um, Alec Guinness, who's Obi-Wan Kenobi, was like, "Yeah, I'm just in like this film. I think it's stupid. Like, I don't get any of it." He was just kind of in it for the paycheck. Even Harrison Ford was just like, "This is a low budget kind of movie," and then it launched his career to the stratosphere. Like, um,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Um, yeah, yeah, it's an interesting thing that Star Wars did, and it also elevated science fiction in so many ways um, to the masses. Dune was popular with readers among science fiction people, but suddenly after Star Wars, science fiction was popular with everyone.
yeah. After this, you get a lot of hard sci-fi like Alien, Blade Runner. Um, you get like action sci-fi like Total Recall.
Hmm.
More satire with the Starship Troopers even later down the line.
Yeah, but I mean that was a book from the 50s, so
Oh, I
I
didn't
mean,
know that.
oh yeah, that's a Robert Heinlein. Jeez. Whoa. Ooh, we gotta educate you on that one. That we might have to put that on the list for summer reviews.
I bring it up because there was a discourse on film Twitter recently about people missing the whole fucking point.
Well, and that's what's interesting because the point of Starship Troopers the movie and the point of Starship Troopers the book is different.
Oh, okay.
Yes, even though they have the same plot and the same themes, it the styling changed it all. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, it will be a fascinating discussion for the future.
Okay. But today we're going to talk about Dune's influences on Star Wars and what the success of Star Wars means to Dune and kind of film in a very general sense. Um, I'd like to start with a quote I found from Frank Herbert about David Lynch and David Lynch's Dune shortly before he died. Um, and this comes down to some problems that exist in 1984's Dune. Um, the problem with Dune was the fact that Star Wars used up so much of it. Uh, they got together and were like, here are like 16 things that are the same. And they said that these were just insurmountable odds. This is crazy. Why did it happen? And a lot of that comes down to like Star Wars is an amalgamation of so many things. And now we're going to talk about them. First, being it is a fantasy.
Yes, yeah, it is, and that's the thing, like, it's way closer to a bunch of wizards running around than a bunch of robots. Even though there are robots that we'll talk about later. But yeah, it's not Blade Runner.
No,
It's closer to, King Arthur and Merlin.
yes, and this is something George Lucas has come out and said a number of times about being like, yeah, like Obi-Wan Kenobi's Merlin. He's the wizard that teaches this young apprentice, and goes on and I mean they save a princess from the evil castle. Like
They do. And the
it's
monster, who's not a dragon, but could be, and yeah.
yeah, like it's very that's a very simple read. But in terms of like big sci-fi concepts, Star Wars does not come close to really having anything in hard sci-fi. Most of like the battles and like ships and stuff are more reminiscent of like World War II dogfighting or like trench warfare in the second in the Hoth battle, like guerrilla warfare when they go to Endor, and that's a very close parallel to Vietnam, which was a big driving force at the time that this film was made. Um, it's a movie about rebels fighting evil empire. Like it's very simple, good versus
Yeah.
evil.
Hmm.
uh, in preparation for Star Wars, he had this idea for Star Wars even before he made his first or his second film, American Graffiti, which was like he noticed that when it came to like movies and things, there was no modern use of mythology. So he started reading a bunch of folklore and tales and myths and things. And he read this book by Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Keep this in mind for later. It'll come up again. But it came to like this idea of having Luke Skywalker be this like mythical figure, this hero that comes in out of nowhere and fights for the forces of good and wins. And that's as simple as Star Wars needs to be. Because that's the heart of it. That's always, even from a young age, what appealed to me about it was good triumphing over evil.
Yeah, and it's very much, the battle of the little guy against the big empire and, good versus evil, the rebels versus the empire, like blah blah blah. That's definitely the gist of Star Wars from start to finish.
In a similar way to that, Dune is less of a hard sci-fi and has a lot of like fantasy or fantastical elements. There are all of these like feudal houses. That's the structure. That's a very fantasy idea. Um, or well, old-timey fantasy, I guess. It's like Game of Thrones esque. Um, there are these mystical witches, the Bene Gesserit, who have control of the voice, this power beyond our comprehension. Um, and there's like this conspiracy to create the mythical figure of the Kwisatz Haderach. Like this is fantasy. This is nonsense. This isn't the science fiction that from the era, like 2001, like other Arthur C. Clarke books. Like There aren't big spaceships and battles and wars and tons of aliens and things. It's very
Yeah,
grounded.
it's not Star Trek.
Right.
And I think that that's the best comparison that you can make, is that Star Trek was very hard science, whereas Star Wars was much more fantasy. We can talk a little bit about how, like Jedi powers and, the powers that Paul has are very similar. Paul isn't moving things with his brain, but he's certainly seeing the future. In a similar way to the way that, a Jedi can feel the Force. Um, and it's different. It's a different mechanism, but it's similar, and it's very witchcrafty. It's not
Yeah, because
sciency.
in the early films, the Force is I don't want to say unexplained because it is. It has like abilities, like you can kind of like mind control people, you can move things, you can push things, you can jump higher, you can do like athletic feats or lift a airplane out of the swamp. Like
Yeah.
it's wizardry, it's spellcraft. Like
Well, and I think that, like the other thing is that, the good the witchcraft can be used for good or evil.
that's true. The evil wizard and the good wizard have the same spell sheet.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's very easy to be um, trapped between those two,
Yes.
or coerced into doing evil things, that you think might be good things, you
like
know.
like Darth Vader, he chokes a guy in a boardroom meeting. That's not very nice. Obi-Wan Kenobi uses his mind tricking powers to get around a police blockade. That's based.
Ha! Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, way too hard, Darth Vader killing, a fascist general. Is it also based? I don't know.
Yeah, but he's not doing it for the right reasons. Like because he kills a lot of his own men.
He
Um,
does. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, is Darth Vader the best Jedi because he kills the most Imperial uh, officers?
So you've come to the correct like interpretation of Vader's like redemption arc is at the end when he finally kills the Emperor, he's redeemed because
Hmm.
he's ending this fascism once and for all. But
Well,
yes, correct. It doesn't at all. Um,
exactly. Yes.
which kind of leads to this a lot of what this slide is going to be about the fascism and the dynasty of both of these films. Once you walk back that Darth Vader's ultimate sacrifice of killing the Emperor, somebody who trained him, changed his entire viewpoint, turned him evil, and like had him do all these terrible things. As soon as you like remove the fact that his sacrifice meant nothing, his character is no longer redeemed, which is insane. Uh,
Yeah, I mean that's true, but I mean it's also a lesson of I don't think that fascism continuing after somebody tries to stop it unredeems them, because I think that's part of the lesson in all of this, is that once the ball is rolling on fascism, it's very hard to put that snowball back down the mountain, or what, up the mountain. I don't even know what kind of mixed metaphor I'm going for here, but um
this
yeah.
this this Sisyphean boulder of fascism we got cooking up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to remove the fascism once it starts, and I think that's part of the lesson of Star Wars in general, is that you have to eradicate it.
Right.
Um,
So
so
and
yeah.
that's something that we get into when you go past the original trilogy, and
Hmm.
especially into this sequel era of like how did the fascism come back? which is a question
Hmm.
that like we've been asking and wondering and don't really get great answers. But this speaks to, in my mind, what is a larger problem in Star Wars as it relates to Dune. In Dune, everything has like a really like concrete and grounded like reasoning, and
Hmm.
there's an explicit point A to point B how we get places. And due to the nature of Star Wars being a thing that is created by hundreds and hundreds of people working on the different movies and games and books and lore, and buying the company and throwing all that away and doing it again, um, you lose that through line that Dune has so well, of showing like, hey, here's the Atreides. They're not awful, but they're a big militaristic force that gets sent to Arrakis so that way they can have a war with the Harkonnens and it can decimate them. And now the Emperor doesn't have a contester to the throne. He doesn't have anybody who's he's intimidated by anymore. And you take that and go, well, Paul, he comes back. He has reason to rise up. He gets all these people together, they go on a crusade. Like, there's a lot more thought into how these things go, rather than the empire just being the face of uh big military that wants control over economics bad.
Yeah, well, and thinking about it too, I think there's other similarities where the Emperor kind of just throws the Siths at the problem, knowing that the Siths and the Jedis are both going to, harm each other in a similar amount, so that, he's also destroying his rivals, because I think that he also knows that someone like Darth Vader is going to be a threat at some point.
Yeah, I mean that's a big part of, in the prequels, Order 66 is Palpatine. He
Yeah.
makes this standing army and he's like, I'm going to condition all of them to kill the Jedi when it's opportune. And he does. And then he eliminates the people that could take him out of not only the position of power, but of being this like dark side user.
Yeah. Well, and I think that Dune also, it sets a precedent for intertwining politics in this, like epic space conflict.
True.
And, because Dune is very political, it's very much about religion. Star Wars, very political, but way more complicated but less intriguing. Like, I don't think that the politics in Star Wars work as well as they did in Dune.
No, no, because it's either over explained, like in the first in the prequel film, where it's like, yeah, we're like doing, there's a blockade and we have to do trade disputes, so we send in some wizards. Like it's boring. Like that's not
Well,
what
and
Star
and I
Wars is
think that
about.
that's yeah, and I think that's a product of them, introducing democracy into the system.
So Star Wars and Kate, this is one of my favorite things you've ever said. Star Wars is a lot like doing the taxes in a
Mm,
in Fallout, like in a fantasy game, like in Dungeons and Dragons. The thing I hate the most is inventory management, doing the taxes, divvying up gold and items and loot and bullshit. I hate that. It takes too much time. It's really boring. It's lame.
yeah.
Star Wars has this like idea of doing the taxes to explain what's going on, and that just takes all the fun out of fantasy. I'm totally okay to suspend my disbelief and go, yeah, there are these evil wizards. They're good wizards. Why wouldn't there be ones that use their powers for evil?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that, I do think that the prequels do have some fun politics, like the Jedi's not being able to sense the Siths because they're too like caught up in themselves, and like they're too like goody two shoes to think that something really evil was happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Shit like that, which is amusing. And I think would have been an interesting thing to insert into the Dune universe at some point. And they might have. I just haven't like, thought deeply enough about it. Um,
I mean, I
yeah.
think that's kind of a part of like the Baron's character. that we're gonna get in part two is he's just like, I've dealt with the Atreides, I have no worries. At least for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, there's certainly a naivete with the Harkonnens to think that the Emperor is actually on their side, and that the Emperor doesn't think that they are also a threat.
Mhm.
Which, yeah, is very naive.
So
Yeah.
if you have any amount of reading comprehension, you know that Dune is about the rise of a fascist ruler, a fascist system, just like this authoritarian, everything goes towards this goal. Um, and we get a lot of similar imagery. Up on screen, I have the Empire when the Emperor comes to visit. You have the rank and file of the troops, all different kinds. And in Dune, both the Sardaukar and House Atreides follow like this similar like show of force. It's very deliberate.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very deliberate. We've talked about the fascism angle in Dune in a couple of our episodes. Um, yeah, and it's there. I mean, we're talking about using military to, you know, take control, and it's absolute. And there is no democracy here. And while you might think that Paul and Leto have some good qualities and they're maybe better than the Harkonnens, they still, want that total control. And they become these, idolized figures. And in a very similar way to how a lot of people idolize Darth Vader.
Yeah,
Like they want to dress
yeah.
up as Darth Vader for Christmas. They want to,
For
for
Christmas.
Christmas. That's when I do on my dress up. For Halloween.
Yeah, I was Darth
Um,
Vader for Halloween because he's badass.
exactly. Okay. Wow. You were really Darth Vader for Halloween?
Yeah, mom got me a Darth Vader costume when I was in high school. So I was Darth Vader for Halloween.
Wow. Okay. I don't think I was ever a bad guy for Halloween, but you know.
I mean, I guess I don't know how to say it without coming off as extremely sexist, but like are there that many like female villains you could have been?
Yeah, like every Disney movie has a female villain.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry, I
Ursula,
wasn't thinking about that.
Millicent, the evil witch, the stepmom. No, like,
Okay, okay, you've
no. But I mean, if we're talking about more like serious adult things that aren't Disney movies, then yes, there
yeah,
tends to
yeah.
be a male-dominated industry
Yeah, what we
of.
need are some scary horror female antagonists.
Well, Brienne of Tarth was the head minion of some evil person in the new Star Wars.
Yeah, yeah, she was Captain Phasma.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. I think if the viewers can take away anything, it's the amount of contempt that is in my voice whenever we bring up the sequel films.
Well, listen, like I liked them. I liked them. I liked them. Okay? Like, but I also would say that I liked the originals, and the prequels are shit. But, like Star Wars, I liked them. The final three movies, I liked them. They aren't Lord of the Rings. They aren't
No.
Dune.
Yeah. They are of a lesser class of media than these epics. Uh,
I did like all the Imperial costumes in the what do we call them? The final three movies.
the sequels,
The sequels.
the
Okay, we have
sequel
the
trilogy.
prequels, the
Yeah.
originals, and the sequels. Okay, God, that's so confusing. But whatever.
Yes, it
I
is.
like the Imperial styling in the sequels. They were cool.
So this is something that will come up in the next slide, but every one of these costumes in Star Wars is iconic. Like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
like off the bat in the photo, like Darth Vader instantly recognizable. The Imperial Guard, the Scout Troopers, Stormtroopers, like they're all iconic in their own
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and if there's one thing that like you can say that Star Wars did not steal from Dune, it was a lot of the costuming. Because I mean Dune is a book, you know, they
Yes.
describe some of the costumes, but not like in great detail so
No, not
that
really.
you know, you really can use your imagination as to where they're going and what's happening. And the films have been able to take their own approach with them. And I do think that Star Wars, the originals, they did some really incredible things with the costuming.
Yeah. The work behind that is incredible. Um, Another thing both of these films have in common is like a dynasty or a lineage. Dune is all about like these feudal houses and like the mysteries of who are your parents and breeding programs to produce, you know, the mystical user of the voice and prescient memories and whatever. Star Wars originally wasn't really about all that. Sure, there were the Skywalkers, and in the second film, it turned out that Darth Vader, you know, was Luke and Leia's dad. And then in the prequels, it's like, well, there's this stuff in your blood that makes you sensitive to the Force. Even though in the earlier films, it was like the Force flows through everything. People can tap into that if they want to. Um, and then in the sequels where all of that kind of goes out the window and there's this mythical grandchild of Palpatine that like has all the Force stuff.
Yeah,
It
so it that and that is so Dune-like, like this, you
yes.
know, like this breeding program that's going on behind the scenes to, you know, create the best Jedi ever with the most power, and then there's like a dyad because there was this other breeding program that was happening that nobody realized was happening, you know, like, yeah, yeah, totally stolen from Dune.
Yes. Yeah, one of the things in our show notes I have is in Star Wars now the Force travels through families and the Bene Gesserit would have had a field day with that. Like
Yeah,
they would be up to some insane shit.
yeah, oh my God. Can you imagine the like force monsters, the Benny Gesserits and the Benny Silax would have produced? Oh my God.
So in the sequel films, it turns out that Snoke is like a clone and like Palpatine was like made of a clone and stuff. And I'm just like, this is just the Bene Twi'leks making Golas and making like these bodies and things, except these have more abilities. So in a way, I think those things are very much stolen from Dune, but in more
Hmm.
of a here's the concept rather than the execution and meaning of the concept. Like
Yeah.
the Golas are used almost exclusively as like political weapons, um, of like having someone to be a confidant to. The breeding program has like its nefarious means and like there's an end goal to it, whereas in Star Wars it's just like yeah, the Force flows through people. Like it's
Yeah, at least that's the way it started. But
yeah.
yeah, by the end, it really did feel like a breeding program.
One of the things that Star Wars almost immediately got a lot of acclaim for was its groundbreaking special effects. Uh, on screen we have the Battle of Hoth, which is probably the coolest like fighting battle war that I think has ever been on screen. It's so exciting, it's so much fun. It's just a massive work of art and tons of talent. It's really cool.
Yeah, oh yeah, super cool.
And it's not as viscerally violent and terrifying as a D-Day.
Well, I guess not.
No, it's not. But that's the thing about Star Wars is it's made for kids. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I think that's the underlying thing is that Dune was not made for kids. So,
no, no,
no, no, no,
no.
no.
Very much so. No, except the 1984 Dune that was made for kids because they had to sell the action figures.
Yeah, yeah, because that made sense. Totally.
In a similar way that costume designs in Star Wars are iconic. The ships, the weapons, the lightsabers, the armor, the X-wings, the Y-wings, the AT-AT walkers, the AT-TEs, the
Aren't they called
Republic.
AT-ATs?
So on screen are AT-ATs. There's
Uh-huh.
ATTs, which are the chicken walkers that were in. Well, one was in this movie, and then they're more in Endor, like Chewbacca gets in
Oh,
one, and
okay.
then there's logs that break into and smash others. Um, there's there's a lot of stuff. Like the Millennium Falcon is I think the most famous and iconic spaceship for a reason. It's just cool.
Yeah, oh, it's very cool.
Uh, when I was a kid, I remember getting the sixth movie on VHS from like the video store, and I guess when I got it, I didn't realize that the beginning, like 45 minutes to an hour, was just a special features thing. And it was all about how they made like the sets on Endor and the fighting and the miniatures and how they made Jabba like the big puppet, and, having three guys inside him to control his movements. All those things I feel like are characteristics of Star Wars that have forever been lost. It's in my mind that's always what Star Wars was this like puppet show, this really artistic expression of the future and war and stuff.
Yeah, and they did their best to ruin it by adding terrible CGI effects in the 90s and ugh.
Yeah, CGI wasn't really at a point then to have it as much as it was. I think, someone like Jar Jar, Boss Nass, all the Gungans, all those like creatures in the Phantom Menace could have been done a lot better with prosthetics and costumes just to make them feel a bit more in the world. Like I think that's
Yeah.
one reason why Darth Maul is really iconic, because everyone knew that's a guy, but he looks like a demon.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. And that costuming was great. But I'm actually referring to in the 90s they remastered the
Oh,
original
yes,
movies.
they did.
And I think it took me until I was in high school to actually see a original puppet full version.
Yes. It's
'Cause
actually
yeah.
really hard to find that version of the movie anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, you have to look for somebody who has it on VHS.
Yeah, like an
The original
original run.
VHSs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which are
Yeah.
degrading rapidly in
Yeah.
the
So
year
if
of
you
our
have
Lord
one in your
24.
basement, you might want to take it to a person who could digitize that pretty quickly.
Yeah, or make tons of copies with the machines.
Yeah, take the lesson from the ring, make a copy of original Star Wars now.
Yeah, it won't kill you. Um, Instead, George Lucas will start coming after you, like in the film It Follows, because he doesn't want that version out in the wild anymore.
Yeah, and the little trash eyeballs from the remastered version will haunt you forever.
The trash eyeballs?
Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh my God. So, the worst part of that remastering is the scene in the trash compactor
Yeah.
because it literally looks like someone made these eyeballs in Microsoft Paint and
Oh,
just stuck them in there.
because there is a stop motion like puppet that is an eyeball that comes out of the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
And they
digitized.
digitized him.
Why? That
Yeah.
was a cool puppet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's called like a Digimon or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, so Star Wars takes a lot of inspirations for its battles and things from like World War II era movies. I mentioned earlier a lot of the space fights were like dog fights. The battle on Hoth is essentially trench warfare where the tanks are these giant walkers. Uh, they have like the boarding scene on the Tantive 4, and that's probably similar to how like assaults and stuff go. It's it's not very unrealistic, let's say. Like all,
Yeah.
all all the violence feels like I said, like a trench warfare movie, Red Tails or something, which is also something George Lucas directed. That's about dogfighting.
Yeah, and it is warfare as opposed to, again, a lot of the stuff in Star Trek, which even in the Shatner years revolved around diplomacy.
Yeah,
And I
or
mean,
fighting a lizard man in the desert.
yeah, single hand-to-hand combat. Okay,
Yeah,
single hand-to-hand combat from the Shatner. But yeah, that's different from, these actual war scenes, maneuvers, that were clearly well researched. And also the lightsaber fights.
yes,
That's sword fighting.
yes.
Um,
The lights. So there's one lightsaber fight in A New Hope that's pretty bad, because it's just Alec Guinness and Darth Vader like kind of slapping each other a little bit. But that lightsaber fight in Cloud City where Luke Skywalker goes up against Darth Vader is amazing.
yeah.
The throne room in Episode 6, amazing. All the ones in the first three, even the one where like Yoda's doing backflips and bouncing around several locations, is awesome. It's cool.
Yeah, yeah, I gotta say, as much as those first three movies suck, like there are some good lightsaber moments. There's also some good spaceship moments. As much as little Anakin sucks,
Yeah,
him driving in the race with
the pod racing,
the pod racing,
amazing, so
amazing.
cool.
Very good. Very well done. It was clear they put the entirety of the CGI budget into that.
So I watched that thing about how that scene was made, and it started off with they made a bunch of the miniatures and like miniature rocks and things, and then did a new form of like texture mapping and like digitizing the thing to save up on space, because if not, it would just be too damn big on the computer.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
they were facing some real limitations, and the effects studio that's done all the Star Wars. I'm pretty sure George Lucas was like a part of like founding it, especially with the first Star Wars, Industrial Light and Magic. They also did some of the Matrix movies, I think. They just came up across so many problems and were able to find a lot of solutions. But now we just outsource all of the graphic design somewhere and have people working in our sweatshops to make this stuff. It's a lot less cool in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, things have changed. Yeah, and I just can't get over, and I've never been able to get over how bad a lot of the special effects are in episode one. I mean that was it was probably the first Star Wars I ever saw, which, we can, question why Dad was letting me watch Saving Private Ryan instead of Star Wars, but
Oh,
um
I remember the first Star Wars I saw was The Empire Strikes Back, and I watched that with Dad one day.
Yeah. Well, I remember watching Attack of the Clones in school. So that was
Weird.
lame. Yeah. Um
I mean, I watch Cars 2 in science class when I was in high
ooh.
school, so like it's all a
Ooh.
crapshoot.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this was one of those like give people stuff to do situations.
Oh,
I think it was some kind of reward for good grades or something. I don't know, but
God, that's
whatever.
a terrible fucking reward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
After one of those like state mandated testing things, we were all stuck in classrooms and we watched the original Planet of the Apes, and that's always one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, yeah, that's talk about effects in that one. Yeah, puppets and
And
yeah,
masks.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to with my opinion on Star Wars. Like the more practical effects, the more like real things feel is great. Like that's one of
Hmm.
the reasons why I like some of The Mandalorian is because of its like feel.
Hmm.
Less so when you realize it's all made on that damn light stage, but again, that's one of the reasons why Andor is so good because it's
Right.
very physical. Like I feel like I could touch the walls of the building and feel the brick.
Right. And they also do a great job in Andor and in The Mandalorian to some extent of creating understandable spaces that are very, new and different, but
Yeah.
also interesting and architecturally makes sense, which is something that a lot of science fiction really struggles with, is you have these interior spaces that are just like you, it doesn't make any sense. And I think that that was something that they struggled with in the Obi-Wan series, is a lot of the locations just didn't feel real.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of the indoor outdoor nature of space.
Yeah, like the interior of the Millennium Falcon is one of those things that like people speculate on quite a bit in like forums and shit. Like even people making Lego models and stuff are always like, well, we have no idea what's in this portion, but like so I've put like a cargo hold here. Like there's such a desire to understand a lot of these places and interiors and all of these locations in Star Wars that you spend a lot of time in because like visually they're amazing. In
Hmm.
terms of like locations, like Cloud City's really cool. The Death Star is awesome to look at. Like there's a lot of like inspiration and art in it, but there's not a lot of like world building or reason. Like at least that's presented immediately. I know once you get into all the comics and games and bullshit, like so much gets over explained, but it's fantasy. It's there to be fun. These are fun places. This is the Mushroom Kingdom we're going to.
Yeah, yeah.
So tying things back to Dune, we don't really get a lot of war. We get a lot of sword fights. We get some of the like ornithopter things. But a similarity we do have is a lot of guerrilla warfare, which I think we'll see a lot of in part two.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of a lesson that is maybe learned by Star Wars from Dune, is that, you know, like the power of a downtrodden people who have, been able to make it work and who have been, spiritually galvanized by the enemy into hatred. And that is something that, Star Wars is about, but because it is kind of a kids movie, they do, couch it in like family and friendship and bullshit,
Yeah,
um, rather than the spiritual hatred of our enemy, which is the real thing that powers rebels to fight back.
yeah. Another reason why Andor and how Andor does such a good job of getting you to root
Yeah,
for them and against the Empire. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there is very little, I mean, there is friendship being an important part of Andor, but you also see friendship weaponized and, friendship backfiring and, your feelings about somebody. And I mean, this doesn't really happen in Dune that much, but you definitely could imagine it happening where, somebody you love is kidnapped, and then you betray your people to the enemy to get them back, and then they die anyway. I mean, I guess that's the whole, Doctor Who,
Yeah.
Dr. Yue,
Do it.
yeah, his
Yeah.
whole plot
Yeah.
is him, and maybe he knew she was already dead or not. That is something that's speculated pretty often. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's used as the framing device for how everything starts.
yeah.
Like,
But I mean that's something that shows up a little bit in Andor and in some Star Wars things, but not a lot.
yeah, and that brings us to a good point that like Star Wars is very much about the individuals and like their contributions to the effort, whereas Dune is more an individual taking control of everyone else's autonomy. Like,
Right, and inspiring the hive to work together in such a way that their individuality doesn't matter. I mean,
right.
that's, like with the Fedaykin, they are death commandos and they will work together for their goal. And they are rabidly believe in that.
Mhm.
And I think that's where, Dune gets into a way more religious place of like, this is more important than anything else. And I think that, maybe that's something that a lot of the Jedis just took for granted that, like, no, really, this is more important than everything else. You really should kill, you know, oh, Ben Kenobi. No, Kenobi? No. What the hell's the guy's name? Adam Driver's character. What the hell's his name?
Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren. There we go. But isn't his real name Ben?
Yeah, his name's Ben Solo.
Solo. There we go. Lame name, by the way. Um
Oh, it is. It is. And they in the Han Solo movie, they give him that name because he doesn't have a family. That's his name. He's just Solo now.
Oh,
It's
Jesus
it's
Christ.
so stupid.
Yeah. Dumb name, but anyway, yeah, yeah. So like had the Jedis embrace this idea that no, doing what you're doing is the most killing the enemy is the most important, goal, embrace the fascism. They might have gotten, a little farther ahead at getting killing the empire. On the other hand, they would have embraced the fascism
Yeah,
and turned into the empire themselves. So, pros and cons here we're learning.
yeah. Star Wars
Because,
can be a good tale about morality when it tries.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, and that's the thing. Like, and that's one of the other messages from Star Wars. That's also the message from Dune is that good guys don't win. Like, yes, they win kind of in the end, maybe, but the bad guys always keep coming back.
Yeah, as long as an incentive exists for there to be bad guys, there will be bad guys.
So that's the choice. You either become the bad guy or the bad guys keep coming back.
You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Indeedy.
So along that lines, there's this idea, and I ask you to keep in the back of your mind Joseph Campbell. So I took a English class, writing class, fiction writing class, something like that in college. And one of the things we talked about was the hero's journey. Um, and it's this template for stories, particularly myths, about a person going and fighting for the forces of good or something. In the reason I bring it up in this conversation is because the example that we looked at, because I went to a computer science school full of nerds, was Star Wars because everybody knew Star Wars. And the idea of this hero's journey is very simple. You have a person who's living a pretty normal life. They get a call to action. They have some like supernatural, otherworldly aid. In Star Wars, it's the Force. They have a mentor and stuff. They they go through challenges like rescuing Princess Leia from the Death Star, but to do that, they got to
Or
meet the
or
smuggler and beat the bar
yeah.
guys.
And with Paul it would be learning how to ride the sandworm.
Yeah, and then there's a very low point in their journey where like usually they almost die. In Star Wars, it's like when they're in the trash compactor, they haven't really gotten out of the situation and they haven't left the Death Star and they're about to die, but the robot saves them. Um, and then they go on a journey of like using everything they've learned and all the relationships and stuff they have to like do better to like achieve a goal, and then they gain some new status quo. In Star Wars, that's the destruction of the Death Star. Is they have this moment where like, hey, we've won the battle. Um, in the first Star Wars, it's framed as like the Empire is gone, it's been defeated, but it's not. But that's because we had a sequel that established new stakes and new things. If you have read Dune, you understand that the first movie kind of ends at that low point of Paul's lost a lot of his family, a lot of his mentors. He's killed a person now, and he's transforming into this spiced out freak,
Yep.
which is awesome. And this hero's journey, the story of a thousand faces, or whatever the name of the book is, gets criticized by people who know a lot more than Joseph Campbell does about folklore and myth, who say it suffers from selection bias of only using like stories where this matters. Um, Alan Dundees, an American folklorist, says there is no single idea propagated by amateurs that have done more harm to folklore study than the notion of this archetype. So there's a lot of pushback in this idea, but I feel like it is a very simple way to check out stories. It
Well,
inspires.
and I will say that while this does not necessarily apply to all folklore ever, it certainly applies to most coming of age stories
Yes,
or novels that
yes,
have been written in the last 100 years.
yes.
I mean, this is the plot of Jude the Obscure. I mean, that was written in like the 1820s. Hey, the story of Frankenstein. Here we go.
Yeah,
You know, yeah. I mean, hell, Jesus. There
the
are a lot
original,
of yeah, the original
the
hero.
original.
Yeah, I mean, or who's the one that took him out of Egypt?
Moses.
Moses? Yeah, yeah. Same deal here. You know.
I mean,
Heck.
this is in a way the story of Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, the low point. I always think of the low point in Lawrence. Well, there's like three. There's too many low points in Lawrence of Arabia, really. Like, there's the point when the kid, is in the sand.
Yeah,
There's the, going back for what's his face in the desert. There's him getting beaten at the, when he's captured.
I think that's the low point because
Yeah,
because after that he does the take no prisoners raid and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Which is another low point if you really want to get into it. Um, like for his like
yeah,
moral
and
character. I mean,
and at the end of the film he goes back to Cairo and like talks with people, and then he goes back to like his normal life in Britain after the war's over. Um, this idea was also inspired by and talked to when Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke were working on 2001 together. Like, this is the Hal and the main space guy. Like, it's that's the journey.
yeah, that's an interesting take there. I look forward to reviewing 2001, but um yeah, yeah. I this is it it's comes up in so many contexts and definitely in Star Wars. I
Yeah,
mean,
and this is where I think the prequels and the sequels kind of fail, is you don't have this simple story structure. You instead have, because like no character in the sequel goes on this journey. Like like Rey sort of does in the first film, but like they don't have all the points. Like all the points in this are occupied by a bunch of different characters. No one person goes on the whole circle.
oh yeah,
Like,
interesting.
I mean, I could go into more detail, but honestly, I don't want to talk about those movies more than we have.
Yeah, yeah, no, but I think it's something that Luke goes on that journey.
Yes, yes, this is exactly that. And Paul doesn't, because he never is able to return to the known world. Once he starts, his jihad, it doesn't go good, which is really where this idea of Dune and Star Wars being very similar falls apart. Is the ending is not good.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Star Wars always has the, happy party at the end where everybody dances, especially in episode one, which is
Yes.
frankly very disturbing imagery. Um, yeah, yeah,
I mean, I'm sure we might get a Lego Dune video game, and everybody will dance at the end of that. Um, who
Ooh,
knows where it'll go?
ew,
Oh, I've
ew.
switched the slides. Um, but that's most of like the big plot and overarching themes that are incredibly similar. The rest is just things that I find fun and interesting to talk about.
Yeah, let's go.
So, I mentioned watching the behind the scenes as a kid. So I loved all these puppets and creatures, and they were always one of my favorite parts because they're very fun, they're creative. Monsters and ecology is a big theme in Dune. Arrakis is a very much a living world with the worms and the spice and the mice and the water and the people. They live in like an equilibrium. Star Wars takes a lot of those ideas of having like these larger than life creatures, having the Tusken Raiders that ride around on these banthas that are like these big hairy things, the Ewoks that live in the forest that are just Care Bears, the Yetis on Hoth. Like there's a lot of care put into here's a being that lives out in this space, but not a lot of thought into how it interacts, which is where I think Dune succeeds in creating the sandworm as like this truly like believable thing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, I think we might be spoiled a little bit because there is that chapter or two in the end of Dune where they like really go into it's like an appendix for Dune where, if you haven't read this, you really need to, but it really goes into Late Kind's like observations on the ecology of Dune. And so like we have a really well fleshed out idea of how the ecosystem works. We don't have that for Caladan or Gideon Prime or some of the other places. Um, but Star Wars has all these interesting different little things, but yeah, they don't really do a good job of making any sense of it.
Yeah, like I never understood the worm that lives in an asteroid.
Yeah, that was weird. I think they were just doing that to be cool. And
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
on that level,
Oh,
having cool monsters just to be cool is fine.
yeah, that's awesome. Like that is what makes Jabba's palace one of the most like iconic locations in Star Wars. Like a whole like toy lines exist of the monsters and things that are on screen for mere seconds because they're so cool and like you're like, well, what the hell is that little gremlin, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And then I think that, one of the ones we kind of talked about earlier before we got on was the Sarlacc and how like what's it doing out in the desert? Because we actually haven't talked about the desert a lot in this
No, no, I
episode.
guess we haven't.
We haven't. And maybe being that that is one of the biggest connections to Dune, we should. But no, really, like that monster, living out in the middle of the desert, like it how does it really exist?
Yeah, what's
Like
it doing?
what's it doing? Does it really like eat enough people out there? Like how does this really work? There's more questions than answers here.
Also, I want to say, because I was looking for pictures of it, the beak doesn't get added until the special editions.
Oh yeah.
The beak is very Tremors-esque.
Oh.
Otherwise, it's just a hole in the ground with tentacles.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, you touch on a good point. We haven't talked a lot about like Dune and Star Wars, but it dunes, I mean, as the sand goes. Because Luke's whole job is like he works on a moisture farm. They collect stuff to get water. And it's like, how is that not a solved problem in galaxy spanning civilization with commerce? But I guess that's part of Dune is you can't import all the water.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that they take from Dune is that, the desert is an amazing battleground and a great place to put people. And I think Star Wars is also very much a Western.
Yes.
People living on the frontier and the fringes and the rebels fighting back there. Where, there's other way more complicated politicking going on these other worlds, whereas, the fringes are where the real battle is being fought. Kind of analogous to like, the Cold War actually being fought in Vietnam. Like what? What
Yeah,
that
yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the
Um
real battle in Star Wars is the gangsters and people on Tatooine controlling like drug trade while the Empire like can't get a hold on it, you know. And then Timothy Oliphant as the sheriff from Deadwood is there miraculously, and he puts an end to it, and the Empire is nowhere to be seen because they don't give a shit until they realize they could be making money off the drug trade.
yeah, yeah.
And we haven't talked about spice either, but in Star Wars there are drugs. But because it's more family friendly, we don't get to know anything other than it's spice, which is pretty lame. It just reminds me of, synthetic weed, which is called spice.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know when that started, so that's interesting. It would be interesting to know from a Dunuary perspective, does the terminology for synthetic weed come from the spice melange or the spice Star Wars?
I mean, I don't know. I would hope it would be from Dune because that's funnier. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's like sure we joke about it, but Weapon of Choice does just like it is just a song with Dune stuff in it in a very similar way to like a lot of Led Zeppelin is just like yeah, and then Gollum was over here and there were like some elves and shit, you know. These sort of like big epics have influences on so many artists. It's unmistakable. Because I'm sure whoever was making the puppets in Star Wars, and especially like the Sarlacc pit and the asteroid thing, were like, yeah, this kind of reminds me of Dune.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a little Google, and all I'm coming up with is directions to only use in a well-ventilated area, which doesn't quite make sense. So, yeah, I have no idea.
But yeah, monsters, puppets, all good stuff. How they fit in, how they interact, the world building behind them, not great, but does it matter when they're cool? Less so.
Less so, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that because it's just not a point of Star Wars. But I mean, it does make it feel flatter. So if we're going to critique something in Star Wars, especially some of the later stuff and the new worlds we're going to
Yes.
now, the worlds just feel so flat because they aren't as well crafted as Arrakis.
Yes. It's kind of the gold standard. Speaking of gold standards, our man C3PO.
Yes, or less sexy Zendaya.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
More annoying too. Yeah. Yeah, so I love a lot of the robots in Star Wars, and I love that they do play a very important part in so many of the plots in Star Wars. They're
Yeah,
really fundamental.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, in 2024, I'm really thinking Butlerian Jihad is where we need to go. So,
yeah. So Dune famously doesn't have a lot of tech. This is because in the universe there was this event known as the Butlerian Jihad, where man just destroyed all thinking machines. That includes computers, it includes calculators, robots. In their Orange Catholic Bible, they added a new commandment: "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind." And this is the big catalyst that created like the divide in humanity because they needed number crunchers. So that's where the mentats come from. Uh, and that's a huge departure from a lot of science fiction at the time, where the solution to all of our problems robots, androids, AI, the new tech doodad, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is definitely a huge departure from Dune in Star Wars. Yeah.
The solution in Dune is do a lot of spice, do a lot of psychedelics. In the far distant future, the solution to like these problems that we saw had way more to do to enlightenment with drugs, which is an amazing like 1960s way of thinking.
Yeah, yeah, to think that we can somehow, reach this elevated plane without with our minds rather than technology. And it's something that like when you hear tech bros talk about shit now, like they sound like they're going to, Arrakis when really they're going to like the worst future you could possibly
Yeah.
imagine.
Uh, I think I've talked shit about it before, but artificial intelligence being used to make art is stupid and should be destroyed immediately. It's awful. There's no reason for it. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it's not ideal. And yeah, I just thought of the science fiction world that it is turning into, and that is Snow Crash. And if you read Snow Crash, you know that this is not pleasant. So
I don't know Snow Crash.
you should read it. It is fantastic. Neil Stevenson, who is one of my favorite authors, it is a amazing commercialized future. He wrote about it in the 80s. He wrote Snow Crash in the 80s, and so much of it has already come true.
That's
Um,
scary.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is very scary to read Snow Crash now. Because I read it probably, woo, like 2017. So, and I can think of things that, have even, it's gotten worse since. So, yeah, yeah, they're going for the Snow Crash future, and I would really like Arrakis. So,
Yeah, I'm in favor of the Butlerian Jihad. I don't we don't need all this tech.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
all bad.
it's really getting bad,
Uh,
and
so uh, I'd like to pose a question. What the hell is a droid?
yeah,
So Star Wars becomes problematic when you think about C3PO and R2D2 for anything more than about 5 seconds. They feel pain, but they seem to be immortal because C3PO was dismantled and then put back together. Jabba was torturing a bunch of them in his basement. They seem to have agency, free will, an intelligence, a mind, but they're also bought and sold.
yeah, that sounds an awful lot like a slave, Garrett.
Yes, it does. In the film Solo, there's an uprising of droids, where they're liberated from the spice mines of Kessel, and yeah, droids are just slaves, and this makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, it is certainly a strange perspective to go. I understand, giving these robots human characteristics to make them more, likable, but it also creates a very strange situation in this world where, you have these utilitarian, non-alive creatures that suddenly have feelings, have thoughts, have rights, form
No, they
unions.
sometimes. It depends. There's a lot of it depends when it comes to these droids.
Yeah, yeah, and it changes. It's a moving target.
Yeah, it's so
Mm,
that's why I like Dune because the answer is we got rid of them.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Because I don't
Oh, the idea of torturing your droids is just like, Jesus Christ. And is that in the first movie or the second one?
that's in the third, that's in Return of the
The third.
Jedi.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I
In
mean, it took us three episodes to get to torturing your robots.
in Empire Strikes Back, some like pig-faced people take C3PO apart.
but if you're taking them apart, like maybe you could be using them for parts rather than torture.
Okay, okay. So here's a question. If so in the sequels, C3PO has a new red arm. Is that would that contain the like soul and personality of the robot that originally had it? Or and C3PO lost a part of himself? Like where is the brain stored?
Well, I mean, you could ask the same question about Luke and his arm.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Well, yeah, yeah, because I mean, Darth Vader's mostly a robot. Like
Yeah.
it's again, this turns into the fantasy of just like, yeah, here's like these ideas that don't have any like repercussion because
Hmm.
like absolutely there should be robot freedom advocates like everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. If we're living in a world where these robots have feelings and
And
autonomy,
people can just wipe their minds at will. Like that's the explanation in the prequels for why C3PO doesn't go, yeah, so Darth Vader built me and oh Luke, I knew your dad and like, I know about all these Clone Wars and Obi-Wan Kenobi's lying to you. Like
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
if yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, yeah, it's gross when you think about it for too long, for sure. But I mean, this is also a topic that's come up in many science fiction, books
Yeah.
where and I mean, this is a plot in the Ender's Game sequels for the Speaker of the Dead, in that like what is life and who, you know, like what makes a species. Like at some point, is AI a species?
Well, this is my favorite part about the Robin Williams film, The Bicentennial Man.
Mm-hmm.
He gets all of his robot parts replaced with like prosthetic parts, and he makes an argument that like, yeah, he's a person, and people are like, well, no, you're not a person, and then he's like, well, don't you have like a prosthetic kidney? Like, well, you're not a person anymore because you're not whole. Like, yeah, at what point? At what point do you become
Yeah.
sentient or
And
agency or
in what point
whatever?
are you a robot? Like, how much of Darth Vader being a robot is a robot? And then too, like you could look about at it the or the yeah, Emperor Palpatine in the same way. Like, at what point did him becoming this like weird, you know, creature, like did he lose his humanity?
Yeah,
Or did he
and
not have any to begin with?
we also haven't touched on the clones at all, which
Oh
is
yeah,
fine
yeah.
because that's a huge can of worms. And that's very similar to the Duncan Idaho Golas of just like you weren't asked to be born, you're an imitation of someone, like but you're your own thing, but
Hmm.
have been conditioned by forces that exist to be something that if you were actually raised like a person, you probably wouldn't ever be. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it's and Star Wars doesn't take that as being super dark again because it's a fantasy because it's a kids film. I'm sure there's a show or some property that does take it really dark to like the adult theme that definitely is, but we're not reaching that height.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting. I think that will be a different topic for, when we get to that point in Dune and the movies,
Yeah,
because yeah, yeah, that'll be interesting to talk about later as we get to that question. And also as Dune progresses, there is more technology, there is more, robot-like things that do occur for good or evil.
so
And yeah.
I think I saw one of the Vlogbrothers made a video about like your eyes are a part of your brain,
Mm-hmm. Oh
and
God, that was horrifying.
yeah, that was horrifying. But like, I think your eyes might be a thinking machine, but in Dune they make robot eyes.
That's true. Yeah. Mm.
The ethics are unclear.
Yeah. Well, and also like you think about like glasses and stuff like that too, and like
Yeah,
Yeah.
am I an android because I have glasses? Maybe.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. And then like, but you also don't see people in the Dune universe with glasses either. So
Well,
that's
they probably
interesting.
just bred out bad eyesight.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what we were doing for thousands of years, and then boom, we invented glasses and stopped doing that. So,
We're getting dangerously close to making a point about eugenics that I don't want to make.
well, isn't Dune just about eugenics, Garrett?
Dune is a story about eugenics and creating like the ultimate person. It is. It's
And it
still
turns out the
uncomfortable.
ultimate person is Duncan,
Uh,
Idaho. So,
no, it's Timothy Chalamet.
no, it's later the second. Okay.
Uh, so, speaking of things with questionable ethics, so this is something really stupid that I forgot to talk about when we were doing the first Dune episode. When we were talking about Jodorowsky's Dune. Um, so I'm going to start out by saying, despite the fact that I hold a CS degree, I hate tech bros. I hate all of them. They're all bad because a
Well,
tech bro
Garrett,
is a very specific type of person.
right, and most of them don't have a CS degree either. So,
That's
like,
true. Most of
yeah,
them have been promoted through the ranks because of nepotism. Um,
yeah.
so
One,
that
money.
yes, money. So this is something that really stupid that some crypto bros did. They made a spice coin. They made a Dune coin, and using it, they bought a copy of Jodorowsky's Dune book, which was the uh, big like art thing made by Mobius, who did like storyboards and things. There are about 20 or so that exist that they think are still out there, and they've gone for quite a hefty sum of money because it's some really great art. So about 25 to 40,000. The Crypto Bros Spice Boys bought this book for $3 million.
Wow.
So it gets worse. On top of cryptocurrencies and NFTs and all that kind of garbage inflating the value of meaningless digital nothingness, they wanted to use this book to make Dune. Now, there's a problem with that, which, if you watch the first Dune, you understand is the problem with Dune has been who has the rights. And that is not the same as having a copy of a book that somebody with the rights made once.
Indeed.
So they wanted to take this and make Dune. We're then told you can't do that because you don't have any of it. And then they were going to turn the pictures into NFTs. And again, they can't do that because they don't own the rights to it. Um, Then there was a schism in the Spice crypto bro space, and a group of them wanted to make an animated show, sort of kind of based off of something Dune, but also they wouldn't own that. And now they're looking to sell the book at a humongous loss.
Cool. That's a real story of nobody talking to a lawyer.
So they did, which is how they learned that they didn't understand anything. And
Okay,
supposedly they
so
talked to a lot of people in Hollywood who also told them they didn't know anything about anything.
yeah, I think the lesson here is talk to your lawyer before you make a $3 million purchase.
Well, I think the bigger thing here is if you have the ability to make a $3 million purchase when you could spend 40,000, I think you spend the 40,000. Um, and I know a big part of the market now is speculating how much things are going to be worth. So you oversell everything and you send stuff to grading companies, but it's all meaningless. Like I found a video that goes page by page through this book. So in my mind, the book can't be worth $3 million if I can see a video of it for free. Like
Well, as long as it's a decent quality
Yeah,
video.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not somebody who usually cares about that, but in this context, it would matter.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is all very dumb and sad and
I'm
yeah,
gonna
just very
use
sad.
I'm gonna use the word pathetic.
Pathetic. It's pathetic
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
pathetic. It's not particularly sad because nobody involved with Dune got hurt through any of it. If somebody involved
Right.
with Dune got hurt, I'd say it was sad. But these are just crypto bros.
Yeah. Well, and they're also missing a very central point of Dune in that, like who cares about money in the end when you're only really worth as much as your weight in water?
That's true.
Hmm.
Um, however,
Or
if
what you can give to the tribe.
however
And
if
the oh,
go on.
oh, and these guys can't give shit to the tribe, so
Yeah.
we should just take their water and be done.
They are probably mostly Mountain Dew and Red Bull, so I don't think they're going to be much water.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh.
I don't want that polluting the sphere.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
So,
Keep it out of the siege.
uh, what did we learn?
We learned that Dune has had a tremendous impact on, sci-fi in ways that, and this is the lesson of Dunuary is that Dune has had a huge impact on science fiction.
Yes,
We talk about all these ways that Dune has impacted Star Wars, and you can't talk about any science fiction that happens after 1977 without mentioning how Star Wars influenced it.
correct.
So, I mean, it's fundamental. And Dune is great, and the lessons in it are great, and the story is amazing, and it will continue to impact media as long as it is, remembered in the cultural sphere.
Absolutely. Uh, so Dune 2 released today at the time of release, and it's expected to make between 65 and 80 million dollars in its opening weekend.
Woo!
Uh, who knows what it will go on to inspire? Will it have the longevity and like critical acclaim of Star Wars? I think it already has. Um, it's a classic work of science fiction, and this film is going to attract so much more attention to it. And my hope is that it inspires tons of people and brings back like these big epic movies, and it doesn't turn into a bloated mess of a franchise.
Yeah, and I don't think it can. I did see a little bit more about that.
The
You
Sisterhood
know,
show,
the Sisterhood show, and that is based on one of Brian Herbert's books, not Frank's.
yeah,
So, I mean, yes, there is going to be bloat in that direction as there is with the series. Like Frank wrote 6 books. We've both read 4. But Brian has written, so that's his son, has written many more books. He's expanded the universe, universally thought to be generally meh, by most Dune lovers. So, take that with a grain of salt. Um, you know, but I think that, these 2 movies at least will be incredible. And, um, yeah, I'm very excited for it.
yeah. I can't wait counting the hours.
Yeah, yeah, very excited.
So I guess we'll see you next time when we get down to figuring out if it was good or not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully we are not disappointed. I'm sure you will hear it in our voices. Yeah, yeah, and hopefully we won't be too, like stunned by the, majesty of seeing something on the big screen to make maybe incorrect, feelings about it. But
Yeah, because this won't be like Oppenheimer where I come home and instantly record the podcast.
I mean, we could do that, but I think we should probably let it sit.
I want to ruminate on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We gotta
Let it
ruminate.
breathe.
Maybe see it a few more
Yeah,
times.
maybe a couple more times. I mean, if it's anything like people are saying, I will want to see it more than once in theaters.
Yeah, the reviews that are coming out are just really like, whoa.
Yeah.
So, well, we hope it'll be good. And thank you for joining us for Dunuary. Thank you for going on this journey where we try to convince you that everything's related to Dune, because it is.
Yes, it is.
And, we will see you next week in the last installment of Dunuary. And then we will go on to talk about movies that aren't about worms in the desert.
Correct. Well, thank
Well,
you
thanks for
all,
listening.
and good night.
Good night.